So today we're going to be talking about insulin resistance. And this video is for you that you have a high triglycerides, you have high glucose in your blood, you might have some high cholesterol. And even if you don't, this video is very important because insulin resistance is at the basis of many chronic diseases and inflammation, and even things that you would never think of, like migraines and hypertension and erectile dysfunction. So every time you eat, your blood will spike with glucose. Depending on the meal, some will spike more, some will spike less. Your body necessarily has to respond secreting insulin so that your cells can capture this glucose from your blood into the cells. So glucose is the preferred fuel for all the cells. It's the easiest fuel, it's the most abundant, and it's just the preferred one. Many cells of the body can use other substrates as fuel, such as ketone bodies, but it's not. It's more hard work for the cells, so they prefer to use glucose. So then insulin is going to be the hormone that is going to make your cells open up and capture that glucose from your blood. If you have very high blood sugar, it's bad to have it in your blood. It can even cause death. So you want this sugar that's in your blood to go into the cells and then give the cells the energy for them to do whatever they need to do. Well, if you keep eating a lot of sugar and your blood spikes very high and your insulin has to be respond with insulin, the more insulin you secrete, eventually your cells start getting like deaf. They don't hear the insulin knock on the door anymore, and glucose does not come into the cells anymore. So that is when insulin resistance develops. So insulin is the only mechanism that will lower blood glucose it's the only thing that will lower blood glucose and make stuff go into the cells. So glucose go into the cells, except for one thing in the muscle, which is exercise. So exercise makes the glucose transporter, the little hole where glucose goes into the cell, open up without the presence of insulin. So that is a very important message right there that we're going to tie in at the end. So glucose spikes and goes down much faster than insulin does. So insulin lingers in your blood more. If you would monitor, so you eat starch, right? A cracker, and then it spikes like this. You have a release of insulin, so your glucose goes down because now this glucose is going inside the cells, but insulin doesn't go down as fast. It lingers in your blood for more time. So if you're producing more insulin and more insulin, it's lagging and it's present in your blood more, and your cells get saturated with it and start getting resistant. Okay, so that's the mechanism behind insulin resistance. And why do you care? Well, you care because insulin is not just for the purpose of getting glucose inside the cells. It has other functions, among which dilating the capillaries. So capillaries are the very tiny blood vessels that irrigate the cells, and it's very thin, like a hair thin, and one blood cell can pass each time, and even squeezed. So if you don't dilate that capillary enough for a blood cell to pass there, guess what's going to happen? Nothing's going to pass, and the cells will starve, not only because they're not getting their glucose, but they're also not getting the oxygen, right? Because the red blood cells is what takes oxygen to the cells. So your cells are starving, they're dying because they don't have oxygen. Your capillaries are not dilating, so your blood pressure goes up. So hypertension can be caused by insulin resistance. Erectile dysfunction can be caused because also the man needs that, vasodilation for it to have the erection. And so if you have the insulin resistance, you don't. And migraines, because migraines can be related to blood sugar control and vasodilation in the brain, vasoconstriction and vasodilation in the brain. So if you have any of these conditions that you have investigated other causes and you haven't found why you're hypertense, or why do you have ED, or why do you have migraines, then maybe it's time for you to measure your insulin, measure your glucose, and calculate some stuff. So what can you do to measure this? So you want your fasting insulin to be less than 6 milligrams per liter. Less than 5 would be better. And if you have it 18 and more, 17 and more, that is insulin resistance established already. You can also measure your triglycerides and divide it by your HDL, which is the good cholesterol, and you want that ratio to be more than 1.5. You can also calculate your HOMA-IR, which is the insulin resistance thing. There's a calculator on Google. You just need two numbers, which is your glucose and your insulin, fasting glucose, fasting insulin. You're going to multiply those two numbers and divide by 405, or just use the calculator on Google. And all that will tell you if your lab work shows that you have insulin resistance. But you can also look at your body. So if you tend to be a little bit more overweight and you have the weight here on your abdominals, that is a very large indication that you are insulin sensitive, because the fat tissue over here tends to accumulate more. If you have some skin tags, those little black spots, because insulin stimulates cells, it stimulates the melanocytes, the cells that produce pigment, to produce more pigment. So you have some dark spots all over. You can also have those lines around here, which is called acanthosis nigricans. And it's like darkened lines, and you can even have darkened armpits or darkened circles under your eyes that never go away even if you sleep well. Those can also be an indication of insulin resistance. And so you are very hungry as well. You tend to have a lot of hunger because your cells are starving, and it makes you want to eat more so that you have more glucose in the blood, so that maybe with a lot of glucose you can get some into the cell. So that's why you get so hungry. And then of course you get lethargic, fatigued, brain fogged, and all that is because you're lacking energy to the cells and oxygen to the cells. Okay, so what do you want to do? One observation that I skipped here is that the fat cells, fat cells, are the first ones to become insulin resistant. Why? Because they have a certain size, and if you keep eating, and the excess will be transformed as fat and stored inside these cells. Well, they start growing, right? When they reach 3 to 4 times their original size, they start saying, no more glucose in here. I cannot make more fat. Please don't put anything more inside here. So they become resistant faster than other cells. And when they become resistant and too fat, they start leaking. They start leaking fat into the blood, triglycerides into the blood, and that's why you can have high triglycerides. And they start leaking cytokines, and cytokines are inflammatory molecules, can be inflammatory molecules. So when you're insulin resistant, you're also inflamed. And remember, I said inflammation is the basis of all chronic diseases. So you definitely do not want that. So what can you do? You want to eat less carbohydrates in every meal. If you're going to have a simple carbohydrate, don't ever have it alone. So if you're going to have a juice, if you're going to have a fruit, if you're going to have a cracker, a cookie, a pasta, some kind of starch, corn, whatever it is, if it's a carbohydrate, you do not want to just have that. Just have chips, for example, chips and salsa. That's just carbs. You want to put some good fats in there and some protein in there to help your blood sugar not go up as fast, so that your insulin doesn't have to be released as much, okay? So also adding fiber. And fiber, the bulk of fiber you're going to find in your fruits and your vegetables. And those are also your multi-mineral, vitamin and minerals, natural. So definitely have a lot of that in your diet. And then you want to always have protein. So protein will help you not spike your blood sugar. So if you're going to have candy or anything that will spike your blood sugar, even the pasta that I talked about, or the pizza or whatever, have it with some protein. Put some meat on that, and put some eggs on that, and put some tofu on that, just to make the absorption of that sugar slower. And also you want to think about the quality of your fats. The person that is insulin resistant, they are more at risk for cardiovascular disease. So you don't want to be eating a lot of saturated fat. You can eat some, and that's okay, but not a lot. So not a lot of very fatty meats, that marbled meat, not a lot of the skin in the chicken, definitely not at all, at least, in my opinion. A lot of butter, a lot of lard, a lot of bacon. You can have some, but not a lot. And then you want to shorten your eating window. I always talk to you this is a very easy strategy. It's free. You don't have to change your diet. You just have to eat in a shorter window. So eating in a shorter window, the smartest way to do this is start eating an hour after you wake up, and stop eating earlier in the day rather than skipping breakfast and having your last meal a little bit later, because in the morning you're more insulin sensitive, so you can use that glucose much more in the morning that comes from your food. So have your bigger meals, breakfast and lunch, and then for dinner, dine like a pauper, right, that they say. So have a lighter meal and don't have a lot of carbohydrates at night. One, because you're not very insulin sensitive then at that time, because your body's starting to shut down to go to sleep, and also because you're going to disrupt your sleep, okay? So when you do eat, try to be very mindful and eat paying attention to what you're eating so that you can stop when you're 80% full. You don't want to eat until you're stuffed, because that just means that you overeat. And then you want to take walks after your main meals, because when you walk, like I said, when you exercise, the muscles will pull that glucose out of your blood without being insulin needing to be present. So if you're already insulin insensitive, so if you already have a problem capturing that glucose, if you exercise, you don't need insulin, so it will pull it in. And keep a regular exercise. You want to even use weights, because you want to build more muscle, because muscle is the biggest organ that will pull glucose inside. Okay. And then very careful with liquid sugar, especially here in the US. Sugar sweetened beverages, all these sodas, even the ones with the artificial sweeteners. Studies have shown time and time again, it won't give you the sugar, but it'll tell your body something sweet is coming, and your body will respond with insulin. And which is even worse, because now you're not giving anything for the body to pull out, and insulin is just there in your blood doing nothing, no function, because you told your body that something sweet was coming in and nothing sweet came in. So no sugar sweetened beverages. Juices are liquid sugar. Unfortunately, even natural, fresh squeeze, you can indulge in them a little bit, 6 ounces once in a while, but not all the time. Definitely not have juice like right before bed, unless you have you're doing a strategy to manage some kind of mental illness. We can talk about that later, but regular people should not be having juice just for having juice, as a snack. Juice in a toast, oh my gosh, that's a lot of carbs. Careful with those frappuccinos, with the teas that you buy, in a can, those iced teas, those have a lot of sugar. And being in a liquid form, it's absorbed so much more quickly, and you're spiking your blood sugar so much more fast, and then you're having to respond with much more insulin. I hope that made sense. And last tip is fiber. So always have fiber. Chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, all your fruits and vegetables. Even adding psyllium, taking psyllium before your meals, 30 minutes before your meals, really helps bind to that sugar and make the absorption much, much, much slower. Okay, so these are all the strategies that you can do. And I would like to close with one thought, that having diabetes, so you can be insulin resistant your whole life and have the problems that insulin resistance brings you, but you can develop diabetes by being insulin resistant, because your pancreas is always trying to put out more insulin so that your cells can capture that glucose, and eventually it'll fail and you'll develop diabetes. Well, once you get to diabetes is a risk equivalent to having established cardiovascular disease. So it means if you are diabetic, it's just the same as you having a cardiovascular disease, a cardiopathy or something like that. So it is everybody that has diabetes will either have kidney issues, will have a stroke, will have a heart attack. It is a very sad fate for people that have diabetes. Okay, it's not just oh, poor me, I can't eat cake. And because of the effects of insulin, people just think, it's fine, I'll just take insulin, or I'll just take my medicine. Well, okay, but you're still putting insulin into your body, right? And having all these negative effects. So definitely, this is something worth paying attention to.